Today we're going to talk about how to properly prepare sheer or chiffon type fabrics so that you can cut them and control that movement so that the grain and the pieces are cut out correctly. So what we're going to do is actually layer that fabric between two pieces of paper, and then pin that all together all the way through. That way the fabric is much more controlled. We'll end up drawing our pattern pieces on this white paper. So now that you've seen the idea of what we're going to do, we're going to move on to actually doing it on the full table. So the first step in preparing to actually cut out your actual fabric is to lay down the brown craft paper. You'll want that to be laid out in the length of your fabric and also matching the width of your fabric. Our rolls of craft paper are 48 inches wide. Your fabric is probably going to be a little bit wider than that. So you're going to need to tape on a strip at the end so that it actually matches exactly the width of your fabric. So this is the first step to preparing to cut your chiffon fabric. So what we're going to do now is actually lay our fabric on top of the brown craft paper. So you need two people really to do this well. So we're going to take the edges of the fabric, line it up. Make sure it's not sagging in the middle. So take your time and make sure that the grain is straight, fabric isn't wobbly. And this is why doing this in a team is a lot easier than doing it by yourself. After you get the first layer, I'm going to carefully pick up the next layer. Put it right on top of the first. And this is where having fabrics that are the same width is really important. If you had widths that were dramatically different, this wouldn't be the most useful way of cutting. Make sure you get all the wrinkles and rolls out. Right, so then the next step, after you get this all straightened out, will be to put your white numbered paper on top that has the pattern pieces that we'll actually cut out. So sometimes the selvage of the fabric is actually a little tighter than the rest of the fabric, and it'll pull your material and give us these little wrinkles here. So to do that, we want to release this tension on the selvage edge. Instead of cutting this whole edge off, which you can do, you can also just do several clips about 2 inches apart and just clip all the way down, and then you can see the fabric lays a lot nicer because we've released this tension here. So the next step is to put our marker that we've made on this numbered paper on top of all the layers of fabric. So we've got our pieces all marked on this white paper. You can see that we also had to patch on an additional width here. Again, this matches the width of the fabric and the brown paper at the bottom. We have our pattern pieces that have already been marked and plotted on here following the grain line. So now we're ready to actually pin this together, which the easiest way to do this is actually to take push pins, or I like to use these T-pins because they're a little bit thinner and they won't poke through the fabric as much or poke as big a hole. So we want to actually just pin the corners and some of these key curves here. And then that way all of these layers are connected together, stabilized, and we'll cut out the fabric together. So the next step we've got is to actually cut out the fabric. So we've got our pattern pieces all drawn onto the paper. We have our pins set in place to stabilize all the layers. So now we're gonna actually cut through all of the layers. So make sure I've got the brown paper underneath, and I'm gonna carefully cut this piece out. Now you'll notice that we have notches we need to deal with. And with this very sheer, slippery fabric that frays very easily, we don't want to just clip into it like a normal notch. You could do that, but it tends to want to fray away very easily. So we're gonna actually use some Tailor Tacks to mark it. So you can see here, I've got all these layers. I've got the paper, the pink layer, the red layer, and our fabric here. If you want to stabilize this a little bit more, you can go ahead and put a pin through here to keep this little packet together once you get this whole piece cut out. And before we take this apart, I'm going to make these Tailor Tacks here where these notches go. And you can do this right through the white numbered paper. You can go all the way through the bottom if you need to. If you want to just catch the fabric, you can as well. So I'm just going to do a stitch right through here, leaving a really nice long tail so that way you can separate these and clip them apart.